Appreciate that. Okay, thank you for joining me for Carl's talk today. Carl is many things, a scientist across many areas and a communicator. And last year, some of us had the privilege of hearing him deliver the Wallaceword lecture on the art of skepticism in the modern world. And we had a great conversation afterwards about learning and teaching in the era of AI. And I think many of us are here today to see what you have to say about how it's transforming how we teach and learn. There's a quote in your description here about sometimes it can be seen as maybe alien technology that has been gifted to us. And I often look on TikTok to see how people are using generative AI in their lives and find it does amazing things like interpret people's auras and read their horoscopes. So it definitely, the way our students may be using it may differ to the way we expect them to and want to teach them how to. Carl is going to talk to us about a course that he developed with someone he's done many educational projects with, Jevin West.
Jevin West, yes.
And I see you've got a slide on that coming up. So I encourage some of you to take a look at that as you, I guess I encourage educators to spend time on the tools. It's very hard to us to get a lot of time often to get some of the experiences and interact more the way our students are. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the kind introduction. I think I've got a mic here. That mic is carrying. Is that okay? Wonderful. Maybe I'll turn this one off. And it's just, there's so much tech going on here. Let me try to get the unnecessary tech out of my way. Now, oops, yes, that didn't work perfectly. Well, sorry. Let me see if I can hide that little box. It's not visible on my screen, you see. What's that? It's gone. Oh, wonderful. Now it is. Now it's back. Oh well. Okay. Let's see. Okay. Now, if I guess if I have it blocking my screen, then it's not blocking yours, so we can get by that way. Thank you so much, everybody, for being here. Really appreciate you all coming out to hear what we've been up to. And what I want to do is talk about the course that Jevin West and I have been developing, and about some of the issues that came up in the process of developing this course. I'll tell you what the course is about. I'll tell you kind of what we're trying to do with it, tell you some of the challenges, and hopefully we can talk a little bit about where to go with that, how we could make it better, and all of that. So, well, it turns out we're going to have to just deal with that, I think. So all of this that I'm talking about is work I've done in collaboration with Jevin West, professor in the Information School at the University of Washington. And we've worked together for a long, long time. We first started working together on educational projects in 2016 when we decided we were frustrated with how much disinformation and deceptive material was being put out there in quantitative form. And we put together a website for a course that we wanted to teach, but at the time didn't yet have permission to teach, entitled Calling Bullshit. And the course taught people how to think critically about quantitative information, about graphs, about statistical arguments. And it was aimed for a general audience, not just for math students or anything like that, but for everybody at the university. The course, before it even existed, went viral. We had it in all the newspapers and things, and then backed the university into a corner, so they had to let us teach it. We've been teaching it for the last 8 or 9 years to audience of 180 every year. It's taught all over the world now. And to share it a little bit more broadly, we sat down and wrote a book that goes through sort of the core principles of the course. So it's something we've been doing for a long time. We've been really concerned about misinformation and disinformation and its intersections with technology and argumentation and so forth. And I remember, as we were kind of working on all this project, I remember Jevin coming to me in autumn of 2019 and saying there's this thing, ChatGPT 2, that's like this, call it a large language model. And he said it's going to change everything. And I said, well, let's look at it. And we looked at it, and it was terrible. It couldn't do anything. And so I said, well, I know what you're talking about, and promptly forgot about it. Then, and didn't think about it really again until autumn of 2022, when ChatGPT seemed to come out of nowhere. This is 3.5, right? The ChatGPT 3.5 released November 2022, and it was amazingly powerful compared to what we thought language models could do. It almost felt like this alien technology or like outright sorcery had been dropped upon us, because it could just do things that those of us who had been working in the field and looking at other approaches to natural language processing and so forth did not think were within the scope of possibility. But and so now we use it for everything. But as in any fairy tale, accepting magical assistance comes with risks. This is Ted Underwood, right? So we want to think about, okay, we got this magical technology, this magical assistance, but it never ever comes for free if you read the canon. And so, well, what are the costs? What's happening to us? So today in 2025, ChatGPT is, of course, ubiquitous. It's in all of our software packages we use. It's in all the platforms that we interact with. Our students use it for just about everything in their homework, their social lives, their letters and interactions. Mark, can I
just want to make sure your mic is.
Is the mic not? I was worried. I'll pin it a little higher. Thank you. Yes. No. I want to make sure we get a good feed for people that are do that. We'll see. Oh, I never figured out a way to get that thing to go away. I think we'll just put up with that thing. That's yes, no. We'll just put up with it. And so our students use it for everything. And more I'm finding that my colleagues do as well. They're using it for all kinds, all stages of the research workflow. From literature searches to drafting to brainstorming to analyzing text to drawing figures, all kinds of things. Of course, there's an enormous amount of hype around this. Well, now we're going to run into trouble. I think it's going to be the most transformational technology humanity's ever created, potentially on par with or exceeding the invention of the printing press, electricity, and the internet. So there's Sam Altman, the CEO of OpenAI. And then, so there are these true believers, of course, and some of them are making more money by being true believers than others. And then there are critics, right? So my friend and colleague, Emily Bender, to their benefit, everyone believed this is a thinking entity, and it's very, very powerful instead of something that's, a glorified magic 8-ball, right? So wide range of opinions about this. It's clear that these large language models are going to transform the world we live in, because they are changing so many aspects of what we do already. It was very easy for them to become part of our lives, because it wasn't like you had to go out and buy a new device. They already ran on the platforms we had. The creators were pushing them aggressively into the platforms we use. And with separate talk, but we could talk about why is it that Google is doing that and so on. And so there's this, fundamental question that I think we need to be asking on the campuses is, what do our students need to know in order to learn and thrive in an LLM world? Because we need to be educating them for an LLM world. They're not going to go away. They may be really great. They may be pretty terrible, but either way, they're here to stay. And how do we teach students to live and learn and thrive in that world? So over the past 3 years, Jevin and I have talked to, literally hundreds of instructors, students, researchers, administrators, employers, about this exact question. What is it that we need our students to know and understand about LLMs to be successful students, successful people, fulfilled people in the world today? And so we've learned a ton. And we set out last summer, or last July, winter, I guess, but we set out to design the course that we think every first-year college student in the world should take. So we wanted to try to design a course that would be useful for everyone as they come into college, to help them learn how to navigate college in an LLM world, which none of us had to do, right? One exception in the room. And that's this. That's our course. Modern day oracles or bullshit machines. How to drive in a ChatGPT world. Let me just show you a little bit of the course and how it works. And actually the one thing we didn't test is whether I was going to be able to switch over. Ooh, I'm not. Okay, we're going to figure this out real fast here on the fly. I want to, let's see, I'm going to do that. And then I'm going to switch over like that. And I'm going to go full screen. And there we are. Okay, now I can probably even make this go away. Go away. I'll just hit the little bar. If I do, okay. Okay, there we are. All right. So let's look at what it is. So it's a set of 18 very short lessons that are on the web, that have been put on the web for students to read, and I can talk about the design as we go. Here's the first one, lesson 1, autocomplete and overdrive. And complete the sentence. After reading the fill of the sweet green grass, the horse and the cow returned home to the. You say barn? Most people do. So does ChatGPT. Stable's number 2. Most people do. So does ChatGPT if you ask it to autocomplete. Game of finishing the sentence asks you to try your hand in text prediction. Given a string of words, you guess the next one in the sequence. That's basically all that ChatGPT and LLMs are doing. Fundamentally, these are autocomplete systems like the one on your phone, vastly more powerful, but the principle is similar. So for example, open up a ChatGPT window and type the first sentence of a story. Press play below to see what happens. So what can I help you with? It was a dark and stormy night. The rain fell in relentless sheets, tapping against the window like impatient fingers. Outside the wind howled. Well, okay. Not very purple prose, but it's, I suppose the cue was, sorry, that you want to continue. So this is what it does, right? I gave it some text, it guessed what next. So this may seem like a frivolous amusement, but the same, process allows it to hold conversations with us. Revise our prose, improve our prose sometimes even, write code in any programming language you write, and so much more. And we find it absolutely amazing that by simply predicting the next word in a string of text, an algorithm can do all the things that ChatGPT does. So one thing we're not trying to do is be deflationary about. This is absolutely amazing, but it also has limitations. Marketing masterstroke, AI companies framed our interaction with large language models not as autocomplete, but in the guise of a chat window. And as we discussed later in the course, this small shift makes a huge difference about how we interact with machines and what we expect of them. Because we are framed in a chat window, we feel like we are conversing with an intelligence. There's a rule that's worked very well for us as human beings until 3 years ago, which is that if something expresses itself verbally, that thing is a thinking person. And so we reframe in our minds what it is that we're interacting with, and so on. So that's just a little introduction to lesson 1 here. So what are we doing with this course? And I'll continue to describe the course and show you more of it as we go. We see it as a course in the humanities. It's not a course in computer science. We're not trying to teach you how this system works. We're not trying to teach you how to build a transformer architecture or anything like that. We're trying to teach you about what it means to be human in a world where LLMs are everywhere. And it's a course about how you thrive in a world like that, right? It's not a how-to course for using generative AI. We could teach a course that told people how best to use generative AI, but it's a when-to course. So you can understand when can you use generative AI, when does it make sense? It's a why-to course. Why would you use generative AI? And most importantly, it's a why not to course. When is it not? Why would it not be a good idea to use generative AI? And the idea is that, they're not absolutes. And so we think of this very much, we teach this through a dialectical approach. And that's the sort of framing of the course, hence the name, right? Modern day oracles or bullshit machines. Dialectic there, the answer is still both. But it sort of depends on what you're using it for, when how you're using it, the way that you're interacting with the system. And we find in our experience with students that this really pulls them in, this dialectic nature really pulls them in. They don't enjoy being, they've got so these are already sort of dialectic issues they're thinking about, right? They've got a firsthand appreciation for the power of these chatbots. They know that they can do their homework for them. They know that they can have it write essays. They know they can do all these other things. They also carry, and having talked to our students, a few hundred of our students, they carry a lot of anxiety about it. They don't quite know what they're losing. They feel conflicted about using it for their schoolwork. They're possibly being told not to, so there may be some guilt issues there. They feel like maybe they're not learning as much because they're doing it. They are concerned in a whole bunch of ways about the fact that their peers are all using it, but they're not sure they really want to, but how are they going to keep up? So the students are really already struggling and grappling in kind of a dialectic way with these technologies. And so what we want to do, this is a quote from our instructor guide, we want to help students grapple with the contradiction inherent in these new technologies, allow them to forge their own understanding about what it means to be a student, a thinker, and a scholar in a generative AI world. So we want them to go through this process themselves. And we think that gets a lot more engagement because students are tired of being sermonized at. They're tired of being told what to do, but not why. It's even worse because, of course, every instructor has a slightly different version. Every instructor saw some webinar saying, don't let your students use them at all. So they put that on the syllabus, or saying, you let your students use it, but you have to have them do an AI use log. So they put that on the syllabus. They don't even know what an AI use log is, but it's on the syllabus now. And so that the sort of students are trying to sort of figure out what each different instructor wants and needs. And that's frustrating and difficult for them. And almost none of it comes with any kind of level of deep understanding of why these rules are being handed down. And at the same time, students truly enjoy thinking and exploring and asking their own questions, right? This is something that over and over again we see and observe because these are issues that they're thinking about in their day-to-day lives. And there's both excitement and anxiety around it, right? They want it to work, they want it to be okay, but they haven't made peace with it yet, right? So we really want the students to do the figuring out, and that's really convenient because given that we don't have the answers yet ourselves, right? So we don't know either what are all the right answers for how to thrive and learn in a ChatGPT world. So to do that, we've really developed a course, just in the main lessons. Every main lesson ends with a sort of core principle. AI chatbots are designed to be anthropoglossic, able to speak, write, and converse in human-like fashion. When we interact with anthropoglossic systems, we naturally assume they have the full range of human capacities. They don't. And then get the students thinking about it. What design features of contemporary LLMs encourage us to view them not as mindless machines, but rather as agents that can think and even feel? So we talked about one, already framing it as chatbots. Another is that they talk in the first person to you. And you could think of lots more as you, and we do. So, so the idea is to have this, and then we'll talk a little bit later on. We've got a very detailed instructor guide that allows the instructor, if they want to bring in all kinds of other discussions and readings and things like that. We thought a lot about how to present this to our students, and we ended up going with this sort of scrolling mechanism. We're using a platform called Shorthand. That's a commercial platform for building these scrolling stories like in the New York Times. I think this works well with students because it allows them, it's hard for them to just be faced with big blocks of text that they just have to kind of read. And this makes them very active, even in a very trivial way, with just moving the text, and just the action of moving the text seems to keep them more engaged. They enjoy that a lot more. And so, this is not necessarily designed the way that someone of my generation would like to consume information, but the students that I've talked to and have really appreciated this, and so we decided to go with this route. You can just I can show you a little bit more about what that looks like. So here, a little awkward bapping back and forth between these, but so here's a lesson, lesson 6. No, they're not doing that. So LLMs aren't conscious. They aren't afraid of you turning them off. They don't have a theory of mind. They don't experience moral sentiments. They don't want you to fall in love with them. They don't seek the experience, avoid to seek the experience of pain. They don't get anxious. And mindfulness exercises don't help them chill out. These are just a few of the things that very smart people have convinced themselves that LLMs are doing. And if you click on any of those links, then you can, of course, see the research paper or the article where people think that's going on. LLMs don't reason the way people do. And we talk about, we're easy prey for anthropoglossic machines. Though if they write like us, they must think like us. Talk about how people could fall into these traps very easily. People read, students can read a little bit about that, tell some of these stories, and sort of end up, explaining that, a metaphor for, and then we have, little for things that students need to terms they know, they can go over this and use a little metaphor here. That when you ask an LLM, why did you do what computer science like to interrogate LLMs, they'll do something. And computer scientists say, why did you do that? LLM will give them an answer and write a paper and say, oh, the LLM did this because of this. But the LLM has no idea why it just did what it did, right? It just, all it has is that previous text. It doesn't have access to what actually happened in its memory states. And so, for those of you who remember Memento, the LLM is just said, oh, you just did this. And said, guess wildly, like, why the hell did I get here? What am I doing? And we all, the humans that we are, often believe it's bullshit, right? So, that's kind of the design of these, and that's a unit. Like that'll be a full unit that a student would read. It would take 5 to 10 minutes, which seems to be kind of the right amount of time for students to prepare for something. Of course, if instructors want to, there are a lot of readings that they can assign to go with it and make this a lot richer. One of the things that we really struggled with was how do we design a curriculum for a field that's moving this rapidly? The rate of development of large language models is incredibly rapid. When we first had our first draft up, we didn't have the chain of thought models, O1, O2, and O3 out. But we knew these things were coming down the pipeline. That was going to change things. So how do you write a curriculum that doesn't become obsolete as soon, the time you put it up there? And part of it is not trying to say, oh, here are the firm lines, right? It can do this, it can't do that. And it's really for us a matter of we're trying to teach principles of thinking about LLMs and principles of how do you decide when it's appropriate or not, rather than prescriptions. Oh, you can use it for this, you can use it for that, because that could change next week. But if you have principles thinking about when this is a reasonable thing for a human to do, when am I comfortable handing this off, when should I not hand it off, etc. That'll help a lot. And we see this, for example, in oops, tab back out. Sorry, I've got a little bit of extra machinery going on here because we've got many forms of technology running simultaneously. So, for example, we talk about this in lesson authenticity, one that's really resonated with students. And so, in the authenticity lesson, we talk about first of all, the human desire for authenticity and how people were so frustrated when James Frey's Million Little Pieces, great story, but turned out to be fabricated. And we talk about how the LLM isn't expressing any kind of, there's no person there having the thoughts or feelings that the LLM is expressing. And look at some of the things people are using them for, right? They've become popular for writing sermons. The Vanderbilt dean who, after a mass shooting, emailed all the students and said, we really feel your pain and we're with you in this hard time and our thoughts are with you. And at the bottom it said, written by ChatGPT. The creepy Dear Sydney ad that you probably saw on the, I've probably shown here, where, dad helps his daughter write a fan letter. And then we start thinking about just to, kind of dive a little bit deeper, like, can an LLM apologize? And getting a little bit deeper into the philosophy of what apology is and talking a little bit about speech acts and giving students just something to think about. What does it mean there? So these are the kinds of places where you get sort of students thinking about the humanist aspects of our interactions with LLMs. I think they come to deeper understanding and conclusions, and they think about what it's like to live in an LLM world. So another thing that's been really important for us, let's see, I'll tab back here. Sorry. Has been, of course, the other way to sort of deal with this obsolescence issue is to keep a record of everything that changed. So but the course is a living document. That's been a little bit of a challenge for us. There have been a lot of people that wanted to translate it into other languages, and I held off granting permission. Normally I grant permission quickly, but my sense is that I'm changing this course constantly. As new things come out, as I realize that I've been mistaken about certain things, I'll make certain claims, and someone convinced me, no, you really can't say that. And so what we've done to at least be transparent about this, and I think it's kind of an interesting document as well about how the technology changes. We've got a change log, and we go through and we record each time we do anything significant to the course. We sort of show what used to be there, and then we show what we've added, and maybe say a little bit about why we've done that. So what all's in the course? There's 18 units. I can kind of take you through just a few of those and give you a sense of what they are. I'll go ahead and pull this up, and let's see. We'll just again tab back to. Gotta hit escape there, and then I can tab back to here. Pull up the table of contents. And so we start out, just with a very short introduction, telling you what the course is about, why you take it, talk about the way they work as autocomplete. We actually have a lesson about what these things do is they are bullshit machines in the very formal sense of philosopher Harry Frankfurt, when he talks about what bullshit is. It's information that's created without any allegiance to the truth, simply to be just to seem authoritative or persuasive. That's all that these things are done, because of course they're not ground truthed. They don't have any underlying reasoning models. They're just trying to generate text that would be a likely text stream given what had come before. We explain that, talk a lot about the way they relate to Turing tests, and maybe why the Turing test wasn't quite the right test. We really stress, and I'll talk in a minute about some of the advantages of these systems, some of the reasons that they're hard to fix, some of the mistakes people make, non-text versions, voice cloning and images and things. Go through talking with students about, good use cases and bad cases, use cases about the problems that happen when the sourcing goes away, when you don't have the blue links you get from Google. And then we take them through thinking about, writing as a human practice, as education, science, talk about how bullshit might be, how these are bullshit machines. They might be good for some of the bullshit work that we have to do. I have to write a number of reports that nobody is going to ever read, but they have to be in the dean's folder just in case somebody comes asking, did Bergstrom write the report or not? And so they might be good for that kind of thing. Talk about authenticity, talk about some of the societal problems that these systems are likely to create, some of the fallacies of hype, the specter of sort of customized AIs, and then what we think is going to happen, like some of the threats that these pose to democracy, right? And that's the course. We can add other things and so forth, but that's sort of the general scope of what we've got. And I wanted to just take a little bit of time and show you a few of the, just to show you some of the kinds of things we do in some of the lessons, and then we can maybe open it up for a discussion. So let's see, I'll actually go here. So we try, as I said, we try not to be deflationary. We are basically AI skeptical compared to a lot of our colleagues, but we think there are really, really powerful things about AI. First of all, we think these capacities that they have are amazing. We don't completely understand them, and it's remarkable they can do all the things they do. We think a lot of times they don't do as much as we hope, and people get tripped up by that. But one of the things that's tremendously powerful about this is, and I think, absolutely transformational, is the way they allow us to talk to computers in our own human language. And so we start out with this, with this famous 1984 Apple computer ad. Apple released this machine that would change the way we interact with computers. And of course, that was the original Apple Mac. And it introduced both a mouse and a graphical interface. And before that Mac came along, interactions with computers kind of looked like this, right? You're working the BSD command line or something like that. And I know Mark's smirking because he still works like that. But for the rest of us, we're in this world now. Visual metaphors, we pull things around, but we don't have to remember the commands. The menus drop down, and that was that radically empowered people that previously didn't have the arcane knowledge to use computers to become computer users, right? And you know, amazingly, we still rely on all these metaphors. The large language models, I think, have the potential to propel a similar revolution, because now we no longer have to be able to speak to computers in computer language. Speak to computers in our language. The computer can figure out what it is that we want. Whether we're asking, you know, for a query where we don't quite, you know, find me papers about this, but I don't quite know its name, or you know, help me write code to do this, or whatever it is. We can tell it in plain English, and it can often figure out what we want. And just to explain with the story, you know, this was my first experience with a computer. I was 8 years old. It was 1979. There was a rent, you know, like a take-home program where a friend of mine took one of these pet computers home over the weekend. And I went over on Saturday morning to check it out. He said, let's write a game together. And he'd used computers a lot because he'd taken a class with, like, you know, it met for 4 2-hour sessions. So he knew a lot about computers. And I said, oh, let's write a game together. You know, let's write a game together. I said, oh, you know, let's write Space Invaders, but the aliens don't shoot back, so you don't lose. And he kind of looked at me like I was an idiot and said, no, you can't just sit down and write Space Invaders. And I'm like, well, why not? Why can't we just tell it to, like, make Space Invaders, but have them not shoot? He's like, no, dude, that's not how it works. Because I didn't get at the time that you couldn't talk to computers in natural language. Well, I had to wait 45 years, but I went and I asked ChatGPT. I've always wanted to go play Space Invaders, but they don't shoot back. Write me Python code to do it. So I wrote the code, it drew the icons, and here I am playing my game of ChatGPT written Space Invaders that don't shoot back. That's the kind of that is a, I mean, you know, that of course is useless, but having something generally empowering people to be able to interact with computers in that way is a really democratizing aspect of this technology, and we, you know, don't want to underplay that at all. So that's you know, one lesson. Another lesson, we talk about sort of good use cases and bad use cases, right? And so we start out comparing you know, the family who inadvertently bought off of Amazon a mushroom foraging guidebook that was written by AI and ended up badly poisoned. And you know, even worse incident with where they all survived. Even worse incident where a AI chatbot convinced a woman to euthanize her dog. So those are bad. But there are other things where it's quite useful. These are my dogs. So instead of euthanizing your dog, maybe you need to just travel with it to Canada. Does it need health records? What do you need? You just need a passport. Are there even doggy passports? Do you get them from the State Department? Like, where would you get a doggy passport? What do you need? So you ask the LLM and ask it for links to government sources. You do that, and it gets the right source and says, "Oh, go right here," and then you can see what you need to, you know, takes you to the authoritative source, and that's a good way to use an LLM. And so we then go through some other good ways, right? Rephrase an awkward sentence. Write computer code to input text from a file. I can't remember the name of the super long book about the dude who's obsessed with killing a whale. It'll help you with all of these things, right? You know, what's kind of key about these, it's very, very easy to, it's very, very easy to check whether it's right. So we talk about some of those principles, right? It's also good at knowing what people tend to say, and so on. So, you know, we have these principles, you know, that if you need to be accurate, asking no is risky. The less expertise you have at the subject in hand, the riskier it is. Don't let no one tell you what to do, but it can be very useful for, you know, suggesting what to try, provided that you can easily and safely vet its solutions. This is trying to give principles, and so this will hold up whether, you know, we be using ChatGPT 6.0. It's profoundly better than what we have now, but, you know, you'd still want to use the same kind of principle logic, right? So we have lessons like that, and then we start talking about, you know, really things that cut at the heart of shoot, let me grab it out of here. Cut at the heart of what we do on a university campus. And we talk about human art of writing, you know, or you let us use calculators. Why not ChatGPT? Our students like to ask. And we think calculators and writing are different things. Calculating is this rote mechanical process. It's suited for automation. There's a single right answer. Calculator can find it almost without error. Writing is art, it's personal, it's an individual form of communication. There's no single right way to say things. Writing is also a generative activity, right? We write to figure out what we think. And so when we write, we're sharpening our ideas and refining our thinking and engaging in creative activity. And if we offload that process onto AI, we lose the opportunity to think. And then there's sort of issues of quality, and we talk about writing quality, and we talk about style. You know, good writers exhibit a powerful sense of rhythm. Eloquents do not. Good writers use plan out paragraphs and sections like generals plan campaigns. LLMs are animal and matter. Good writers are surprising. LLMs are designed not to be. Good writers deploy novel metaphors. LLMs recycle hacky one. Good writer expresses a unique perspective. LLM gravitates to the least common denominator, the text on which they're trained, right? So, and students, you know, explore with this, and some of the exercises that will have students play with this and explore this. We talk about, you know, well, why not just train them on the writing of good writers? And then there's the issue of novelty and creativity, and no LLM's ever going to say many years later, as he faced the firing squad, right over in the wind, that was to remember the distinct afternoon when his father took him to discover ice, right? No LLM will ever come up with that. And then, you know, issues of plagiarism, which are, you know, interesting to students, let them think about that, and so forth. So, you know, talking about writing, talking about what's happening to education as well, like how are LLMs going to transform education? Because our students are really interested in sort of, you know, taking a 30,000-foot view and looking back down on what they're going through right now. And you know, so here's Saul Khan. I think we're on the cusp of using AI for probably the biggest positive transformation in AI that education's ever seen. The way we're going to do that is by giving every student on the planet an artificially intelligent but amazing personalized tutor. And then we say, well, AI has already transformed education. And to make a long story short, it's killed the research essay as a viable assignment, the out-of-class research essay, and it's threatening the skill of reading because my students put their articles. They say, you know, Bergstrom assigned a 12-page research paper. Give me a 1-page summary. That's not TLDR. But when we engage in reading, we're not just processing words in linear order, right? We're synthesizing, we're thinking. And if we instead take an AI summary, we're depriving ourselves of the opportunity to do something like that. And so, you know, if AI is actually going to improve education, well, we're deep underwater right now. People are going to have to come up with some useful things. So we try to think about what some of the useful things might be. And we talk about, you know, also why the AI is unlikely to replace universities quickly. I mean, well, some of you here remember when this lecture was never going to take place because the university was going to be completely online because MOOCs were going to transform everything. And if I was amused to see my university's new AI manifesto, and then just searched and replaced, you know, the word AI with MOOC, and you had our MOOC manifesto from about 15 years ago. It was, you know, there was scale and there was democratization, and of course none of it happened. Yeah, and then we just talk about some of the really dreadful things that people are using AI for in classrooms so that students are aware of this. You know, just helping students think about that. And then talking about how AI is changing science as well, right? So there are great aspects, there are great applications of AI in science. You know, my colleague David Baker at the UW has doing this amazing work where he uses AI systems to essentially hallucinate new proteins. So it says, okay, I want a protein that will catalyze this particular chemical reaction. But here's the catch: it needs to do it in oil, not in water. What would that protein look like? It hallucinates different proteins, and then it finally, you know, spits out a suggestion. And then the key thing that makes David's approach useful is he's got a high throughput pipeline to be able to actually generate those molecules, those proteins, and then see whether they actually work, which hallucinations were creative, which were just garbage, right? But he's able to do things. He's able to create proteins that do all kinds of things that no natural protein does using this. It's brilliant. So this is, you know, it's a great use case. And this is what we're trying to, again, this is the dialectic. We're trying to show students, like, look, we're not saying that AI is bad. Like, here, this is super cool. But then you get companies like Sakana AI that claim they can fully automate science. They've got a pipeline where, you know, in 30 minutes they could write. You can You type in a topic, it'll find an actual, you type in a broad topic, it'll find a research question, it'll do the summary, it'll generate the data, it will analyze the data, it'll write up the paper for $15 a paper. And they've gotten these things published in some of the, not the best CS conferences, but they've gotten these things published in CS conferences. And so we talk about, well, what's wrong with that? Talk about the sort of Taylorist misconception that that scientific papers are the output of scientific activity, the way the televisions are the output of television manufacturing. You can make more televisions faster and cheaper. That would be better television manufacturing. You can make more papers faster and cheaper. Well, it wasn't the papers you were trying to make in the first place, it was the knowledge. And the papers are vehicles through which that knowledge is communicated. So, we just kind of take students through thinking about all of this and how that relates, how this relates to what they do as scientists. And then I'll show you just one last lesson before talking a tiny bit about teacher resources and wrap up. But then we do finish by talking about democracy, because I'm really worried about what AI is going to do as a threat to democracy. And so we start out by talking about the way that 8 years ago the FCC received 19 million fake messages from bots commenting on whether or not people wanted net neutrality or not. 19 million messages said, no, we don't want net neutrality. But they were easy to catch. They all said the same thing. Sometimes they were sent, 100,000 of them were sent within the same second. And it turned out the telecom companies were behind it. They'd hired some kind of, opinion generation firm to do this. Now with LLMs, this would be much harder to catch. They'd come out at different times. They'd all say something different. They could be easily cued to the demographics of whoever purportedly sent them. They were using fake names. They were using the names of real people who had actually sent them in the previous efforts. And our entire representative democracy requires that we be able to communicate to our elected representatives about what we want, need, and so forth. And so, as you know, the U.S. is imploding right now. So I call both of my senators most days and talk to them about them. They not talk to them. I talk to their answering machine about what's going wrong. But the disturbing thing, of course, is that with you can artificially synthesize novel voices and write prose to do this. People could be grinding at any scale they wanted, automated calls from LLMs telling them, no, we really, really love the idea of impending fascism in America, and please could we have more of it faster, or whatever it is that they would be wanting to push. So I think this is a really scary thing for democracy. It's something my students are really interested in, and we talk about it a lot. And there's all the fake news stuff, the need for an informed electorate, the way that AI can turbocharge fake news propaganda campaigns and so forth. The way that even the media is falling prey to this. We talked about how AI is undermining one of the most beautiful things about the internet for a while, is that for a period of time there was the opportunity for relatively safe anonymous communication that allowed all these different possibilities. And one of the reasons that worked was because you didn't quite know who someone was that you were talking about, but if they were talking, they were someone. And now that's no longer the case. Now, if someone is talking, if someone has a story, might not even be a someone that's there. And to get around that, we're going to need to start thinking about, better ways of authentication. And authentication and anonymity are opposed. It's not a completely intractable problem, but it's a deeply problematic one. And then we just think about, the ways that a world where AI becomes an important form of decision making and an important base of knowledge, like I sort of have a center foundation, is profoundly undemocratic because of the national scale on which these models operate. Right, when the National Science Foundation in the U.S. wanted to create its own research large language model, they decided it would cost $100 million, and that was too much. And so, even though this is the most important existing sort of technology at the research tech transfer interface right now, National Science Foundation in the U.S. just said, no, too big for us. We're gonna have to let it just stay in the hands of these closed companies. So there's so much power in being able to be the one that chooses what are the training sets, chooses the one that how does the reinforcement learning with human feedback work, et cetera. And all of that is opaque and in the hands of a very small number of very, very rich people. So this is a big problem. And we talk about sort of examples there. So yeah, turbocharging disinformation, interfering with government, undermining anonymity, making opaque decisions, concentrating power in the hands of few. It's a lot, and is democracy ready for this? We sure hope so. So getting the students thinking about the large scale societal implications. Again, it's a humanities course where we want them understanding how this is transforming the world, as well as just thinking about, how to make a good query or whether they should use it to do their stats homework. So finally, let me just, let's see. I guess I don't even need to show you that. Finally, I can just jump to this. So in order to make this easy for people to use, we've developed a really detailed instructor guide. And what the instructor guide, it sort of states our philosophy, and then goes through and presents for each lesson a whole suite of possible activities that you can do in class. Readings from both commentary pieces in the popular media to scientific papers, exercises you can do. Here's instructions, for example. I think this one's really fun. Students love it, on how to simulate a Turing test. Here's a prompt that you give an LLM to tell it that it's playing in a Turing test. You set up your computer with Slack. You've got a Confederate in the other room, and you're either talking to your human Confederate on Slack, or you're talking to the LLM that's been prompted like this. And have the students try to guess, and the students shout out what to say next, and they shout out, "Oh, say this," and it says, and you can do this a few times. It's really fun and really interesting to do. And you talk about, well, how did they figure it out, or why didn't they figure it out? So we have, just for every lesson, there's lots and lots of these sort of exercises to do in class, games to play online. And so the idea is, if you want to build this out into a full, semester long, say, honors seminar or something, you've got plenty of stuff to dig deep. If you want to do something more like we do, where we try to pack this whole course into 3 or 4 lectures, you can just assign, 3 or 4 units for each, or 4 or 5 units for each lecture, have them read the 4 or 5 units, still well under an hour reading, and then talk about. So there's a lot of different ways to use it, but we really want to see that people, we want our students to be thinking about these issues. And in my experience, when they've done this, and in a couple of places it's been piloted already, the students are very eager to engage, and they walk away somewhat relieved to be able to put their fingers on the sources of discomfort that they've been feeling around this, and to be able to better justify and to be better to themselves and to their peers why they want to not give up their agency to these machines entirely and engage in a more traditional learning process. So, of course, when the rubber hits the road, you're a bit stoned, it's 1 a.m. and your paper is due, you're probably still going to use ChatGPT, but I'm not asking people to be their best when they're at their worst. I just want them to learn to be their best when they're at their best. And so I think that's kind of where we're coming from. So that's what I have. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen. If we had a couple of minutes for discussion, I would love to hear what people are thinking, whether this is useful, whether you're doing similar things, different things, all of that. Thank you.
Yeah, I've got a question from online already.
Oh, wonderful.
This looks like a good course for all to do, not just uni students. We're all students in life, after all. It's got a question mark, but it's actually not a question.
Yeah, no, it's a great prompt. It's something that I meant to talk about. So of course, it's been designed so you can do it for independent learning. First of all, it's like, and actually for the discussion questions, we're putting up videos where Devin and I have discussions that circle around the discussion questions. So if you can't be in a discussion section, you can kind of still hear these conversations. We're currently collaborating with a group of high school teachers to design this for high schools, aligning the content here with our high school standards so that they're usable in high schools, and putting it in a format that'll be more amenable to high school use, namely basically PowerPoint slides with with lecture notes right there in PowerPoint slides, so the teachers can come and present the material.
That's fantastic, because that just answered the other question we
Great.
had about if it's being adaptable for the schools.
Yeah, so that's what we're working on, but it'll probably be 6 months at least. The high school one will be a little bit more condensed. It'll be.
Thank you for your talk. I'm curious about how much is detail on the fact that LLMs depend a lot on the training set, and that through novelty, I mean, there would be a limit on like, it's kind of probabilistic novelty that can be created to certain prompts,
Mhm.
but through novelty, it's that if it's not available in the training set, it would never be created, which is a lot what David Baker is seeing in space.
Yes,
That
right.
it can only depend on what's already in the training set, and things that have not been explored cannot be accessed through these models.
I mean, I think that's true. You know, I've taken a much stronger stance in that direction until I talked to a friend who was studying use of AI in mathematics. And I said, oh, you know, look, the thing that AI is useless because the thing is, if you sort of think of all the things we know, the answers they'll give you are sort of in the convex hull of all the things that we know. And then my friend who a philosopher of mathematics said, you know, actually all of mathematics is in the convex hull, some very simple axioms. And so anything to be discovered is in the interior there. So that made me rethink what I meant by novelty. And I still think there is something basically right about what you said, but I've gone from like really grinding that to backing off a little bit.
Yeah, I guess I'm thinking in the context of biology, because we know
Yes.
quite a bit, but we still lack many of the central axioms, I believe.
Right, yes.
Like we collect a lot of observations, but we don't have a general theory for biology. So I guess that's in the context of I was thinking, because you have a discipline that is contained within certain rules, and that guides the
Yes.
final. Yes.
I think we could probably stress that a little bit more in our section on science than we have. That's a good point. Yeah, it's not gonna come up with a new general theories, or I don't think it would.
Got another one in the room, yeah. Oh, we can have this one, yeah.
Oh, sorry. I had a couple of things.
Yeah.
So the first thing I wanted to say is like, I feel like I have a little bit of a critique because you start off talking about how like there's no person in there producing the sentence, but then right at the end of the course, you start talking about the motivations of the people who produce the models in total.
Yes.
And I wonder if your course is actually like underemphasizing the man behind the curtain who is shaping the voice of the LLM and the outputs that it's creating.
It's a good question. I need to think about whether we do that. I think it's a very important issue. I think we want people to begin by understanding that an LLM is not an intelligence of the sort they're used to interacting with. But we definitely want to finish with people, and there's sort of 3 final chapters, of which I kind of only showed you one, that try to get at the ways, actually the 4 final chapters, get at the ways that LLMs are being used by various actors to shape society.
Yes.
And about the pernicious consequences of that. So I think it's probably okay to start off by disabusing people of the notions. I think it's very hard to do that an LLM is an intelligence in the same way that any other. It's not like me and it's not like my dog. It's something different. And I want to start by breaking that, but it's absolutely critical to get into these things we're talking about in the democracy chapter and then actually the 3 previous chapters as well.
I agree with that because that's certainly something that I've observed is that the creators that are around very, very keen for people to not think about their role.
That's true. Absolutely. That's a great point. Yes. Yes. We were just talking about that. Yes, I was talking about that with Mary Moses right before this talk about exactly these issues.
And if I could make just one more point,
Yeah.
your point about novel creation. I come from a generative visualization background.
Yeah.
And so one of the things that we've done a lot of is like thinking about, so the training models, basically what you get in the final draft of the LLM is like you get this possibility space that takes in not just what you've trained, but is creating the synthesis between things that we've never synthesized.
Yes.
And that's something that I think the general populace is extremely excited about. Like you see them creating all of these images that are like Mickey Mouse versus Shrek, like
Right.
a thing that no one's ever painted before. And I wonder if like the novelty in these things is not so much they can create something wholesale new, but they are creating new syntheses that we have never created before. And that might be really useful for science in terms of like systematic review and that.
Yeah, I think it could be, I think, yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. What people get excited about is, my senior picture in the style of Van Gogh, or my PhD thesis is written by Shakespeare. They're kind of trivial overlays in a way, or, I think of them as like, yeah, anyway. But, yeah, but then the question is, yeah, is there, and I haven't thought about this before, is there a space, a useful, productive space for that kind of activity within science? And I don't know.
I think I've got 1 minute. There's a couple of questions online, but the last one I'll ask is, what evaluation has been done for both staff that have used the resource and from students, really seeing if it's pitched at that right level and is it appropriate for say first year?
Evaluation yet, because we just released in February. So we'll be using it in our course in fall. We'll do some evaluation there with we're going to be doing kind of a lot more formal pre-post test stuff going forward. So the answer is, as yet, it's all based on interviews and nothing formal. I know we got to do better.
We're used to short terms here.
I know we got to do better.
Thank you all for coming. Thank you for sharing that. And we had almost 100 people online.
Oh, that's wonderful. Thank you for everyone who, bore with us online. Thank you.